Do 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 do. Hi. Okay, here we go. Hi, Keith here with another video. I hope this one is being recorded. First, if you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. Helps me build a channel. I'm up to 161 subscribers, and I thank everyone who has subscribed. Trying to get a good angle here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so if you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. Helps me build a channel. So we're I think, in a really grim time in history. Very tense situation. Very scary. Recently, like 3 weeks ago, tension was sky high. It's eased somewhat, and there's some reasons why I'll talk about, and there's some hope for the future. I'll discuss this. Some hope for the future. Before I get to that, though, some catch up on some current events, some things that have happened, and some narratives. First, as everyone knows, Elon Musk bought Twitter, and oh boy, all over Facebook, like, liberals were losing their shit over it. The possibility that Elon Musk might end or ease censorship. In fact, the Biden administration, the Biden White House almost blocked, almost was going to, the stories was going to block Musk's acquisition of Twitter on national security grounds. Like, free speech, freedom of speech becomes a national security issue. Okay, so I'm going to build, before I get to that, let me just make my case here. It's a bit complicated. First, I don't like Elon Musk. I don't have any illusions or in him. He's a billionaire oligarch, Silicon Valley oligarch, and hence is a mortal enemy of the working class, enemy of all working people. He's the richest man on the planet. He's worth, I believe, $230 billion. Richest man on the planet. He's not. He took the name of a visionary inventor, Nikolai Tesla, early 20th century visionary inventor. But he's not an inventor. He's always been a finance guy. He inherited a diamond mine, literally, in South Africa. So he's not. So he's an integral part of the U.S. military-industrial complex and the security state. His Satlink system, which has been getting publicity in Ukraine, is a low-orbit satellite, small low-orbit satellite system. It's an integral part of the U.S. drone warfare. They're heavily dependent on that. Also, the U.S. global surveillance system, it uses Musk's system. So Musk is very much, in fact, he gets his bread and butter from the military-industrial complex and the security state. He plays the role of being like a maverick. For a while, he was saying he was an anarcho-syndicalist or libertarian. That's the class interest of a billionaire. They have all this money and they don't like anybody telling them what to do. I don't have any illusions in the guy, first of all. He's a piece of shit. He's an abusive employer, too, actually. The story of the famous episode when he was smoking weed, smoking a huge doobie on the Joe Rogan show, which I used to do stuff like that in college, but not anymore. But he did that on Joe Rogan show. That was entirely a stunt, a weird stunt. It turned out, what I've read, Rogan himself was not ingesting cannabis. He was smoking something else. And Elon Musk smoked a small amount of marijuana mixed with something else. So, I don't know why he did that. That was one of his employees, or former employees, pointed out that he has very strict anti-drug policy for his own company. He regularly tests people. I guess he pays well, but he's anti-union. His workplaces are very regimented. He's an abusive worker. He's an abusive employer, and he doesn't allow his own employees to do that stuff. I'm unclear why he was doing that. And Joe Rogan, that was a time when he was doing a lot of weird things. For a while, his stock shares started to plummet, and investors were losing confidence. Not that I don't believe in capitalism, but investors were losing confidence. So there's a story on CNN. I haven't watched it in years, but I used to get cable. Someone else was paying for it, but I used to get cable for a time, and I had CNN on sometimes. And apparently around that time, Elon Musk had a new CEO in his company. I think it was Tesla, one of his main companies. I think it was Tesla, one of his companies. I'm not sure which one, but he had a new CEO. And this woman who was supposed to, she was in charge of basically putting a leash on Elon Musk, having him shut up and restoring investors' confidence. Okay, so there was this guy on CNN who was an interviewer, some Wall Street investment guru. I forget who the guy's name was, but he interviewed Elon Musk's brother, who I forget his name, but Elon Musk's brother, and the Wall Street guy kept asking Elon Musk's brother, What are you doing to reassure confidence as this new CEO? Is she going to like reassure the markets, and what is she doing to like reassure the markets? And this guy came off like a flake. He kept saying his new age stuff like, oh, we have to reassure the harmonic convergence and Mercury in retrograde. I forget exactly what he said, but some like new age stuff. We have to, the harmonic convergence is coming, and we have to align all our chakras or something. And and the Wall Street guy got a little angry at him, like, you have to take this very seriously now. Please listen to me. This is, I have a prestigious show. Many people on Wall Street watch me, and what are you? I'll ask you again. What are you doing to reassure investors' confidence? So Musk's brother kept repeating this. The chakras are in alignment, and it came off like another flake. I don't know what was going on there. That was so weird. So anyway, regardless of it, Elon Musk stock did bounce back up. I mean, he's built into the system. He's a huge military contractor, military defense contractor. He can play it being an anarcho-syndicalist or whatever he wants to do. It was so weird. Okay, so as far as censorship, I oppose censorship. I'm extremely skeptical about Silicon Valley censorship and narrative control. Yes, there are some repulsive figures. The censorship on Twitter became a big part of the culture wars thing the last couple of years, and many prominent conservatives and leaders of the MAGA movement were kicked off Twitter. There are some vile, repulsive figures. What's his name? Richard Spencer, America's foremost white supremacist. I'm glad he was kicked off Twitter. I don't know what he said exactly, advocating violence. Mike Cernovich, the Gamergate guy, you're vile. Both these are really vile characters. Okay, yeah, sure. Milo Yiannopoulos is a really vile character. Okay, yeah, sure. Okay, I don't miss these guys. Okay, sure. But there are other people in the conservative movement. Mike Lindell and my pillow guy. He's an absurd figure, but why kick him off? Candace Owen, another person. I think they're kind of absurd figures, but I don't. Okay, but more important than that, these people have been kicked off Twitter. But you know who else has been kicked off Twitter? RT and Sputnik, Russian media, and whether you agree with them or not, I mean, they've been kicked off all U.S. and Western both social media platforms. They don't want you to hear the Russian side of the Ukraine war, the Russian side of things. At least people should get a chance to hear the other side. But no, they've been kicked off. People in the key figures in the Russian leadership have been kicked off Twitter. Putin is officially on it, I think, but other people have been kicked off. Many prominent people disagreeing with the official narratives in the Ukraine conflict have been kicked off Twitter. Scott Ritter has been kicked off Twitter twice. First, both for the same thing both times. A year ago, I don't remember one, maybe not a year ago, a few months ago, he said, now I have to worry about YouTube censorship. So I'm just repeating what Scott Ritter said. He talked about the Bucha massacre. The Bucha massacre Bucha is a suburb of Ukraine, a suburb of Kiev, and for a while it was occupied by Russia. The Russians withdrew. The first 2 days, no one, as far as I understand, no one said anything. There's an interview with the mayor of the town. He didn't say anything. On the third day, these dead bodies were found in the streets. Looked like they had been freshly killed, and no one did adequate forensics on them. As I understand, that's my understanding. I don't know who carried out the massacre. But anyway, Scott Ritter said this was a Ukrainian war crime. He was first kicked off Twitter like 3 or 4 months ago for saying this. Then after Elon Musk got back on, he said, I'm going to test this. He said, this is a test. He said the Bucha massacre is a Ukrainian war crime. And apparently he got back on Twitter, by the way. He started his own account. He was kicked on his own initiative. They didn't let him back on. He just started his own account. And so he did this a second time. And then Twitter, this is after Elon Musk took it over, so Twitter said to him, they asked him to take down the tweet and apologize. He refused to do it, and he was banned a second time. So much for freedom of speech. So another figure, Gonzalo Lira, who was also a Chilean-American businessman. He's also criticized the Ukraine narratives. He was banned from Twitter. I don't know what for, but probably something similar. Interestingly, he and Scott Ritter, they hate each other, but that's a whole other story. He was banned. But who's not banned? They have a huge number of what are called NAFO trolls. NAFO stands for North Atlantic Fellows Organization. It's goofing on NATO, but NAFO. They're literally trolls, a troll army, a troll movement. They attack any prominent figure who it happened with Max Blumenthal, the journalist, any prominent figure who disagrees with the official narrative on Ukraine. Also, these NAFO trolls, they're trolls, literally, they'll post like weird pictures, and their purpose is to block any discussion. They inhibit a thread from developing, they block discussion. And they're very good, they're very effective. The articles about them is they're actually very effective. And they're widely regarded as being probably from the CIA. I don't know, but they're probably from the CIA. They're orchestrated. They're actually a form of censorship. They're inhibiting discussion along lines which they don't like. So there's a form of censorship. There are a huge number of these. As I mentioned, about a third of all, apparently, Twitter accounts are bots, and a huge number of these are actually NATO or pro-U.S. imperialist bots. For example, when the coup attempts in Venezuela, Juan Guaido, all of a sudden there are a gazillion, all these accounts, Twitter accounts came from out of nowhere. All of a sudden they were saying stuff like, end the Maduro dictatorship, free Venezuela, end the communist dictatorship. And the same thing happened with Bolivia. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, Elon Musk, he famously had the tweet that, well, if the coup in Venezuela, we'll coup whoever we want. They call it the lithium coup. Believes the allegations that he himself was personally implicated in the coup. He played a personal. I don't know this for sure, but there's some allegations. So anyway, as I was saying, there are these NAFO trolls, or these huge trolls which push U.S. government imperialist narratives, the Syrian conflict, Syria, all sorts of other the coup in Bolivia, gazillion of these accounts came from out of nowhere, pushing U.S. imperialist narratives. So then, Twitter is totally okay with that. Twitter is okay with that. Now, okay, so very famous, the 2020, Jack Dorsey was the co-founder and CEO of Twitter. He famously blocked, or under Jack Dorsey, he's not the guy who did it, but he famously blocked the Hunter Biden laptop story. And this was huge. It had been already verified by the FBI as a legit story. It was a true story. It wasn't a QAnon hoax or some fantasy. It actually was a true story. It was everywhere. And it turns out the FBI met with Twitter and with other Facebook and other social media platforms to ban the story, to censor the story. And it was a true story. It was a damning story, too. It pointed to possibly massive corruption on the part of Biden and Biden's family. Personally himself, 10% for the big guy, and it painted a story of massive influence peddling, Hunter Biden influence peddling, and they're still investigating it. A lot of it is verified as true. I mean, the story itself is true. Whether everything it says is true, I don't know, but it's pretty damning, and something the American people had a right to know about. The FBI worked with these social media platforms to censor this story, on the behalf of the Democratic Party. People talking about with Russiagate nonsense that it was Julian Assange and then some Facebook bots interfered with the election, Russian bots. This is a gazillion times worse than that. The FBI was working with these social media platforms to get them to censor a story which they did not like. Okay, so that's one big thing there. Another thing, there is a Counterpunch writer, Paul Street. Now, Counterpunch was a venerable leftist. They're online. They have a hard copy as well. They have a paid subscription section. I've never done that. But I used to read it every day. It's really gone downhill. They always were quirky. Counterpunch was started as a newsletter in the 90s. I think Alexander Cockburn, famous British or Anglo-Irish journalist for years, ran it. He got really, really quirky. He was kind of a right populist, and he became a big Ron Paul supporter. But anyway, now they've gone the other extreme. They're very much in the shit-lib extreme. They're very much liberal. I don't regard them as a leftist, so they're liberal. Anyway, Paul Street was a little Counterpunch writer. He's an activist. I believe he lives in Kansas. Interesting guy. I heard him speak at the Left Forum in New York, I think 2017 or 2018, I don't remember. Interesting guy. He was a good writer. He's goofed on the Democrats. He called them the dismal, dollar-drenched Dems. He was a good writer. Well, like Trump fried his, like so many people, Trump fried his brains. totally fried the guy at Paul Street's brains. He had this effect on so many leftists became liberals, and liberals became security state worshipping fascists. Literally, Trump had this weird effect on that terrorized so many people who should have known better, or should have had a little deeper analysis. Anyway, Paul Street, now his article after all, oh my god, we have a fascist attack, the fascists are taking over, like article after article after article. It's probably right, so it's unreadable. Anyway, 2020, you know what was going on in 2020. He posted on Twitter, he thought that a large part of the U.S. population should be put in camps and denied food. He actually said this. Yeah, he actually, I'm not gonna, I'll leave out the context. You can guess what the context was. But I think this is horrible, whatever the context. You don't put a large part of the population in camps, effectively concentration camps, and then kill them. There's a technical term for this in political science, or two terms really. One is fascism, and the other is genocide. I mean, that's horrible. And, okay, Paul Street posted this, he seriously posted this on Twitter. Underneath it a little while later, he posted, only joking. Then underneath that, he said, no, I'm not. And he deleted it a few hours later, okay? But Twitter was totally okay with it. Twitter was totally fine with it. They didn't mind at all. Okay, so the moral is so many of these people now, all of a sudden, they're pissed off at Twitter now that Elon Musk might ease censorship, and he's not going to do it, by the way. So many. Where were they when Paul Street, he was advocating violence and genocide? Where were they then? Where were they when Hunter Biden laptop story was blatantly censored? Where were they when these NAFO bots and pushing one imperialist narrative? Where were they then? So it's really irritating, frustrating. Yeah, I'll totally admit some of these alt-right characters are really vile. Absolutely true. I fucking hate these people. Richard Spencer and Milo Yiannopoulos is a fucking horrible piece of shit. I totally agree. Yeah, okay. But I'm profoundly mistrustful of Silicon Valley censorship. That's what I'm trying to say. There was an article, it should have been a bombshell article, which came out in The Intercept. Now, The Intercept is all over the place. They're they're run by oligarch, I forget his name, the guy who owns PayPal, but they're constructed opposition, kind of. They do some actually interesting stuff, but then they reinforce narratives. Anyway, The Intercept had a really bombshell article on the DHS turned out it has basically a backdoor to social media platforms, basically all of them, most social media platforms, and they met with the FBI and other people met with them to censor information, to encourage some narratives, discourage others. I mean, this is pretty fucking scary stuff. This is 1984 stuff. They were censoring and manipulating social media and internet messages, suppressing narratives they don't like and encouraging other narratives they do like. And liberals are basically totally okay with this. I thought it was pretty scary stuff. It's making rounds. A few months ago, the DHS had this thing they call it. A woman named Scary Poppins, who was in charge of censorship. She backed down. They backed down. There's huge backlash against it. Back down. But there's kind of the same stuff there. So the DHS knew when there was someone who went against the narratives on these platforms before the owners of the platforms. And they knew when Facebook, somebody violated their content moderation, censorship shit on Facebook before Facebook itself did. The federal government was openly doing this, which I think is pretty scary totalitarian stuff. The left should not support this. Now there is, I think, liberals, there's a saying, scratch a liberal, find a fascist. I think it makes sense from a Marxist perspective. Marx and the 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon, tons of other stuff, pointed out some of the contradictions of bourgeois democracy, of liberal democracy, and liberals require, like Trudeau and Canada, very progressive and woke and freedom and everything, but they have to keep preserved within the context of capitalism and the bourgeois state. When capitalism is threatened, that's when the mask is off. So underneath those liberal veneers of deep authoritarianism. That's what I think we're seeing. With liberals are now super censorship happy, censor this. We're threatened by fascists. We're a fascist takeover. We're going to have a fascist takeover. Oh my God, that's what we need. More censorship, more surveillance, more control of the population. Only way to stop fascism. I mean, that's kind of what they're saying when it went down. So I'm really worried. I think Silicon Valley is one of the biggest sources of fascism. As far as the fascist threat in the U.S., Well, the southern. I was looking up the. I was familiar with the Southern Poverty Law Center (SPLC). I used to years ago work for a company which did fundraising for them, and they're a liberal NGO. I actually think they did some good work. I think they did. They were really good at monitoring and suppressing some of these fascist groups. They did some good work, and I give them credit. They were liberal and a little weird. I think their founder was a guy. Founder was a guy named Morris Dees, and it was a conscious policy and part of the company to develop a personality cult around him. Seriously. And I know some of the older women I work with literally had a crush on Morris Dees, which was a lot. He was pushed out. I don't know. I think it got a little too much. They got some. He was Me Too'd or something. He was pushed out. I don't know the whole story, but SPLC does have some good literature. Interesting literature. They've monitored these fascist groups very closely. By the way, these groups are heavily monitored, heavily infiltrated, heavily tracked. Whenever there's like a terrorist incident, some right-wing terrorist incident, you'll always find like suspect was known to the FBI. Like every single time, it's become like a cliche. So, it's like the Communist Party was in the 50s, like FBI agents informing on each other. So let's keep things in perspective. Yeah, there are some really vile figures. Absolutely, all right, absolutely vile figures, but some perspective here. Let's keep some perspective here. So I don't think Elon Musk is going to end censorship, or he may allow some people back on. He's still in the interest of the security state. He's going to still, I guarantee he's still going to be very censorship, be very pro-NATO, pro-U.S. imperialism. Okay. Another thing that went on, probably everybody knows, someone broke into, or got into, the house of Nancy and Paul Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is the U.S. Speaker of the House. She's the third in line succession to the presidency. She was in D.C. at the time. Her husband, Paul, who's 82, was at home. A Canadian, someone attacked him with, I think it was the scissors. Attacked him, and apparently a Canadian, David DePape. And apparently he's from Canada. He lived in the U.S. for years. Apparently he was on, as a right wing would say, he's an illegal alien. I hate that term, but illegal alien. He was undocumented workers, visa expired. There are a huge number of Canadians who live in the U.S. on expired visas, and as a huge number of Israelis. The feds just don't really care all that much. They do care about brown people, but black and brown people without visas, they do care about that, but they don't really care about Canadian or Israelis too much. Anyway, so this guy, so attacked Paul Pelosi, smashed his skull. He was in the hospital for 6 days. Apparently he's okay. He made a full, as far as I know, he made a full recovery. And I condemn this act. I totally condemn it. There early on, so Hillary Clinton, right after it happened, Hillary Clinton posted on Twitter that this shows this guy was influenced by the hatred whipped up by Trump. Okay, so Elon Musk answered Hillary Clinton. He said, no, this guy, David DePape, was someone Paul Pelosi picked up at a gay club. I have no idea how he knew that or where he got that information from, but that's what he said. And he apparently, this guy, Kim.com, who's an eccentric German, he's a Silicon Valley oligarch, he's a libertarian. He legally changed his name to Kim.com, and he moved to New Zealand. The U.S. feds are after him. But he's a libertarian. Anyway, he echoed this as well. I don't know where they got the story from. But so that became the template of the two narratives. So people on the right and some people on the left who hate the Democrats, like me, generally say, yeah, maybe somebody Paul Pelosi picked up at a gay club. Other people more said, maybe he was whipped up by this right-wing hatred and it was an assassination attempt on Nancy Pelosi. I don't know, there's been tons of contradictory stuff coming out. We'll probably never really know. The story seems to die down all of a sudden. What we know about David DePape is that he had a relationship with a woman named Gypsy Traub. That's her nickname. I don't remember her real name. Her nickname, Gypsy Traub. He had some relationship with her. He fathered her children. But then he was also the best man at her wedding. It was a nudist wedding. I don't know what their relationship was like. One of his children said he was abusive towards them. Apparently they were kind of hippie leftish hippie types, where Gypsy Traub, the house they lived in, I don't know if the DePape had lived there at the time of the attack, but the house they had lived in had a Black Lives Matter symbol, had like a rainbow flag with a marijuana leaf in it, then had a sign that said, all are welcome here. Not something a MAGA Trump supporter would be inclined to put. Other people say that, he later he was mentally ill, paranoid. He apparently got into QAnon. One account said when the police came, David DePape was in his underwear when the police came. Another account said both David DePape and Paul Pelosi were in their underwear when the police came. Another account said none of that was true. None of them were in their underwear. I have no idea. I'm inclined to think this case, the mainstream story, is probably close to the truth. I still have questions how DePape got into their house. It's in the Pacific Palisades section of San Francisco, I believe, neighborhood. Very high security. The Silicon Valley oligarchs live there. Very high security neighborhood. And also have Secret Service and their own private security in the house, or how he got in the house without Paul Pelosi allowing him into the house. I still have questions about that. Looks like there's a broken window, but the glass looks broken outward. I have no idea what was going. Apparently, he attacked Paul Pelosi, and Paul Pelosi, he went to the bathroom. His phone was recharging in the bathroom, and he called. I mean, some of the stories, I will probably never know what really happened. This is a case, the mainstream story is probably closer to the truth, but I think it's still very important to be skeptical of the mainstream because they lie all the time about everything. They lie on an industrial basis. They lie about Ukraine. I'll talk about the COVID narratives. There was a lot going on there. They lie and lie. They lie about the Iraq War. They lie about literally everything. And this content moderation shit I was talking about, the article in The Intercept, it wasn't just like COVID narratives or Ukraine narratives. They were the Afghan war, Biden withdrawal from Afghanistan. Literally every single thing they were stage managing how it was going to be presented, which is pretty insidious or authoritarian stuff. Yes, it's pretty horrible stuff. So, by the way, I condemn the attack on Paul Pelosi. It very well may have been an assassination attempt on Nancy Pelosi, and I don't support individual terrorism like that. Nancy Pelosi is a repulsive, and her husband is a repulsive figure. She first became Speaker of the House, I believe it was in '06, if I remember. She immediately said this was the Iraq War, and George Bush had become a widely heated figure, and the Iraq War was an illegal war which probably killed upwards of 1 million people, one of the biggest war crimes in history. So, first thing Nancy Pelosi says, impeachment is off the table. Nope, we have to let bygones be bygones. We can't let divisiveness, we can't get into divisiveness. We have to, Turns out she was most likely complicit in some of the war crimes herself. It's believed she was in the House Intelligence Committee, where she heard closed-door sessions about torture and some of the human rights abuses the U.S. was doing. And she didn't say anything. It's just believed she was complicit in some of this stuff herself. It's widely believed why she said impeachment is off the table. She led on the impeachment against Trump for utterly trivial, ridiculous stuff. And Trump is a horrible guy. There are certainly grounds to impeach Trump, but not for what they impeached him for, some weird procedural stuff, not giving arms to Ukraine. I mean, this is weird, so freaking weird. So everything was so. And Nancy Pelosi, of course, is the queen of insider trading. She and her husband literally made millions from legalized insider trading. Congress people and senators secretly get to hear some of that stuff going on Wall Street, and they act on it. They buy stuff. It's legal insider trading. It's pretty horrific. And she has an ice cream locker, like an ice cream freezer. I think it's like $70,000 ice cream freezer. She was interviewed about it. She was like a Marie Antoinette figure, like totally smug. And the Republicans made a lot of mileage out of that. Now, the Republicans probably whip up a lot of hatred against her. She's worthy of hatred. They whip up hatred for the wrong reasons, not as systemic. But so this is the kind of stuff that happens. So the mainstream narrative might be true. It's what a shitstorm U.S. politics is. The midterms, yeah, I didn't vote. I don't vote for Democrats or Republicans. I live in Maine. There's Paul LePage, is the former governor. He's really a right-wing, unhinged figure, totally unhinged figure, anti-worker. He famously had the labor mural at the Maine State House had taken down. He's an unhinged character. He was defeated. Janet Mills is the current governor. She's a liberal, not great. She's not great on Native American issues, Native American sovereignty, tribal sovereignty, and some other issues. Not really great on Native American issues. Could be better on environmental issues. Environmental groups have criticized her, but they're kind of like critically endorsing her anyway. I suppose he's has a project to build a windmill farm and some island, offshore island, main island. I don't know. I didn't vote. Was a third independent candidate running for governor, moderate liberal. They didn't seem that interesting. I vote if there's a bond issue or something. Yeah, okay, more school bond issue or something. Yeah, I'll vote for that or whatever. Healthcare for all, I'll vote for that. I'll vote if there's a third party, like Green or Socialist third party candidate. I may vote for that. Otherwise, I don't vote. I don't for Democrats. I don't vote for Democrats or Republicans. Okay, so the real thing I wanted to talk about here, a couple of weeks ago anyway, the situation in Ukraine was really tense. And there in several different areas, and we were in, it looks like, and I still think it's a pretty dangerous situation. The tension has eased somewhat since then, but it's a pretty dangerous situation. For a few days, like 3 weeks ago, I couldn't sleep a couple nights. So let me explain. There was talk of a nuclear war, increasing talks of that. First, Putin made a speech September 23rd where he talked about, basically said, we don't want to use nukes if you attack us with nuclear weapons, or if you launch you destroy the Russian nation, then we'll respond. So that world without Russia won't be worth living in. Like if a surgical attack destroy Moscow, the Russian leadership or somehow, then yeah, well, we'll use nukes. This was nothing new. This was traditional Russian military doctrine for the last 30 years, or even early in the Soviet period. This was nothing new. Putin said this in response to increasing buzz by U.S. politicians. I think it was Rod Menendez, a few other people. Early hawks talked about using tactical nukes. There was some weird buzz going around. So Putin said it in answer to this, like, don't even think about it. But however, Putin's speech was taken out of context. It was manipulated. Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken, a whole bunch of other people, took it out of context. And the CNN narrative was that Putin is threatening nuclear weapons. Putin is losing, so they're threatening nukes, which is completely untrue. Completely not what was going on at all. I'm not happy with the way Putin said this, actually. I'm not happy with the way he expressed this. But he did not threaten nuclear war. But tension ramped up. So Zelensky, Volodymyr Zelensky talked about using since the West should use, thought the West should use tactical nukes, small nuclear weapons against Russia. He walked away if you walked back from it a few days later, but that was pretty scary. And then that died down. Then there was talk of a dirty bomb, the Russian Ministry of Defense. They claimed they had hard evidence that the Ukrainians were planning a dirty bomb attack as a false flag. A dirty bomb is not a nuclear bomb, a conventional bomb packed with radioactive material, which could do a lot of damage. And the idea the Ukrainians were going to do this and blame it on the Russians in order to get NATO directly involved. I don't know how true this is. Scott Ritter was a little skeptical, doesn't think they would do it, but it appears the Russians took it very seriously. They complained to the UN, brought up to the UN Security Council. The idea is that the more they talk about it, the less chance of it actually happening, and it seems to have died down. Scott Ritter didn't think it was ever a serious prospect, but I don't know. The buzz died down, but tension was dramatically escalating. Then, of course, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline was bombed. Everybody knows about that. It was widely believed the U.S., the U.S. had the most to gain in that. The U.S. vociferously opposed the Nord Stream pipelines going back years. Angela Merkel and German industrialists to some extent stood up to the U.S., but the current German leadership is not capable of doing this. So then there's the Kerch Bridge bombing, a bridge which connected Crimea, which is a peninsula, to the Russian mainland. It was very important civilian infrastructure, supplies, and things like that to Crimea. It was a terrorist attack on civilian infrastructure, actually. It was possibly used in military things as well, but it didn't. Apparently, it was truck bombing. It was meant to destroy the bridge. It looks like it didn't. And the Russians very quickly were able to repair this. So, and then there was the Sevastopol bombing. Russian ships, naval ships, and other ships which were used in guarding. There's a grain deal. The Russians said, okay, well, we'll help. For a while, grain couldn't get out of Odessa and other ports. and so Russia worked out a deal. So we'll guard them. We'll guard the grain ships out of Odessa into the Black Sea. We'll guard them. And okay, well, this attack was against those ships used in the grain deal. And it didn't do as an underwater drone attack. Didn't do that much damage. It damaged one ship. Apparently, the Russians blocked it. But the Russians said they obtained. They said that they did hacked Liz Truss's phone. She was the former Prime Minister of Britain, in power for 44 days, the shortest serving Prime Minister ever. They got into her phone. They got a message she sent to Anthony Blinken, said it's done. It was time for shortly after this actually happened, which would, of course, strongly imply she had some major insider knowledge of what was going on. Further, the Russian Ministry of Defense, so the Russians claim that the British orchestrated both the Nord Stream pipeline bombing and the Kerch Bridge bombing. The U.S. had to give the green light ultimately, but the British orchestrated. This would kind of make sense. And tensions dramatically escalated. Like, they're going to retaliate. Russians are going to retaliate. What are they going to do? Tensions. So it was a scary time. Then it came out the 101st Airborne Division of the U.S. Air Force, an elite called the Screaming Eagles elite force, is in Romania, like 4 miles from the Ukrainian border. And the commander of this group said, we're ready to go at a moment's notice. Like, oh shit, we're going to have a freaking war. Oh shit, oh boy, they're going to get us into a war. The neocons badly want their war with Russia, and this is going to escalate. Interesting. Scott Ritter actually said in an interview he didn't think it was, it's not, their purpose is to reassure U.S. allies, basically, since they're probably not going to directly intervene. That made me feel a little bit better. But overall, massively tense situation. Jim Kavanaugh, I interviewed him several times. He writes for the Polemicist blog. He's definitely worth checking out. His last entry a couple of weeks ago, he basically said, we have an over 50-50 chance of a nuclear war, or at least of a direct military confrontation between the U.S. and the Russian Federation. He doesn't know if it's going to happen, but over 50-50 chance of it happening. And it was a little scary. Since that time, tension has gone down a lot. Apparently, they're saying that Blinken. Oh yeah, by the way, I forgot to mention Ben Wallace, who's the British Secretary of Defense, Minister of Defense. He came to the U.S. He claimed his security was breached. He's probably right. The Russians know everything. Anyway, so recently came out Blinken. Others apparently are, at least on paper, pressuring Zelensky to negotiate. Now, it's bullshit. Zelensky, they sabotaged any attempt to negotiate. There were some negotiations going on in March and April for a while. Boris Johnson famously met with Zelensky twice and no negotiations. Zelensky said he'll negotiate as long as the Russians give up Crimea, which is never going to happen, which is obviously not going to happen, so it means they're not going to negotiate. So anyway, they had to look a little more flexible. Yeah, we want to, because the war's going on and on. Now it's devastating Europe. There's major energy crisis. British economy is in free fall right now, largely because of this, largely because of sanctions, other reasons as well, but largely because of the sanctions. A German economy is shutting down. BASF, which is the world's largest manufacturer of plastics, they recently relocated to China. Interestingly, a subsidiary of IG Farben, which was part of the work closely with the Nazis. They made Zyklon B gas and designed the concentration camps. Well, BASF is apparently a subsidiary, or started as a subsidiary of IG Farben, interestingly, but BASF moved to China. The German economy is shutting down. There is totally mass unemployment. People will literally freeze to death. And they're beginning of mass protest all over Europe, which is really good. Czech Republic had 2 protests, both around 70,000 people each. I posted about one on Facebook, and then people attacked it. Oh, they're all anti-immigrant, they're all fascist. Well, it was organized by an anti-immigrant party. I don't know if they're racist, but one of the major parties of the Czech Republic, anti-immigrant right-wing populist party, in coalition with the Czech Communist Party. They're the 2 groups which are opposed to NATO, opposed to what's happening. And I don't care who organized it. There's huge protests, which is a very good thing. There are protests developing in Germany, all over the place. Huge protests, mass protests developing. And this gives me hope for the future. In fact, their Nord Stream pipeline was bombed in reaction to the protest. There's growing political pressure. Let's end these sanctions. Let's open up the pipeline, let's end these sanctions against Russia. So they destroyed the pipeline to remove that as an option. But the protests are still continuing, or still escalating. There are several, the left isn't horrible. So the European left is horrible. They have a left, but it's horrible. There's a Podemos in Spain, Die Linke in Germany, the Greens, which are really horrible. They're not really left anymore. A bunch of other parties. They played a horrible role. I mean, radical left. Okay. Syriza in Greece. So, there is good things and bad things about it. The good thing is that the left doesn't provide any leadership, but they can't derail it either. Like in 1968 in France, it was literally close to a socialist revolution. 10 million workers were on strike in the cities, Paris and elsewhere. They were occupying their factories. They were literally sitting in and occupying the factories. It was just one step from literally taking over the factories, kicking out their owners and taking them over. It was really close. There's evidence de Gaulle was scared shitless. He broke with NATO, and NATO hated him, but he actually went to NATO headquarters in West Germany for consultations. There's a theory that he might have come back, restored. If things had gone further, he would have come back to France on NATO tanks to restore capitalism. That's one theory. I don't know, one theory, but it was that close to a literal revolution. It was derailed big time by the communists and the socialists. They moved into electoralism, and they got a better deal for the workers. They were paid more, but the chance for a social revolution was flubbed, was put off. And there's so many other examples like that. The left largely controls the working class on behalf of the ruling class. However, they can't do that anymore. They're so weak and dissipated, they can't do that anymore. Good things and bad things. They're good. They can't provide leadership, but they can't sabotage the movement either. So we'll see where it goes. There are several small number of politicians in Europe. Claire Daly, who's one of my heroes. She's an MEP, a member of the European Parliament. She's from Ireland. She was in the CWI. They were at least the second largest Trotskyist international, the Committee for Workers International. I was a member myself for about 10 years, a little over 10 years, half active, half not active, but I was a member. And Claire Daly was expelled from the CWI for her relationship with a guy named Mick Wallace, who's also in the MEP in the European Parliament, and they collaborate together. I don't know a lot about Mick Wallace. He's on the left. I don't know if he considers himself a socialist. He owned a pub restaurant, and there's some tax problems. He owed the EU, owed somebody, the Irish government, I think it was 70,000 euros in VAT tax, value-added tax, and there's some things he was maybe a bit dodgy, real estate speculation he was involved in. Apparently he's okay with the government. He didn't, I don't know if he broke any major laws, but he was considered a little dodgy. And the socialist groups the left in Ireland wanted to pass a resolution basically condemning him, and Claire Daly didn't want to do that. Nope. And she was basically pushed out of the CWI. Probably good. She can be a lot more. I don't think she'd be as feisty as she is now. If she was still in the CWI, they would have put a break on her. But she and Mick Wallace, whatever his background, they're doing some amazing stuff. They're calling out the suicidal policy of NATO. They're calling out imperialism. They're calling in Africa, Western imperialism in Africa. They're calling out warmongering. She's doing some amazing stuff. I could almost see maybe there's hyperbole in. People might think this is ridiculous, but I can almost see Claire Daly and Mick Wallace as the Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht of Europe, of the future European Revolution. That's my fantasy scenario. Claire Daly probably isn't like a theorist like Rosa Luxemburg was, but still kind of, there are really few people on the small radical left. And I think there's some hope for the future. There's also hope. There's a German woman, Sarah Wagenknecht, if I pronounce her own name right. She's a leading figure in Die Linke. Die Linke is a German leftist group. They were big some years ago. They formed from the core was the PDS, which came from the East German Stalinists, the East German SEP, Socialist Equality Party, Socialist Unity Party, Sozialistische Einheitsparty, something like Socialist Unity Party. Anyway, they became, after the East Germany collapsed, they became the PDS, Party of Democratic Socialism, and then they merged with a smaller group in Western Germany led by Oskar Lafontaine from the SPD. He left the SPD, and they merged. They merged from Die Linke, and Die Linke has they had some initial successes in Eastern Germany, former Eastern Germany. They've declined and flopped. They've come close to losing their 5% in representation in the German Parliament, the Bundestag. They're under 5. They get over 5%. They get some stipends from the government stuff. There's a group called the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung in New York. They're like a wing of Die Linke. They use some money the German government gives them, and they do activist projects in New York. I've been to some of their events. They're interesting. Die Linke, I think they're largely social democrats, and Rosa Luxemburg herself probably would have been rolling over in her grave, but just the same, they do some interesting stuff. I've been to some of their events and talks. Okay, so anyway, so Sarah Wagenknecht actually is married to Mittelblock. I can't think of the guy from the SPD who split. But anyway, so Sarah Wagenknecht was a leading figure. She doesn't hold office right now. She doesn't hold office, and she's not, she's a writer and an organizer. I'm not sure what she does. But she's been countering a lot of these narratives, like why these sanctions against Russia, so they're destroying the German economy. Like, why are we doing this? And there's a firestorm of criticism against her from her own party. There's a move to expel her. There might be a split in Die Linke, which shows how utterly ineffective and meaningless Die Linke is. She's one of the few people calling out this stuff. Very few people. So I could see maybe beginnings of some type of leadership developing from people like Claire Daly, Sarah Wagenknecht, a few other people, some beginnings. We need like a Zimmerwald movement. And it won't come from some tiny ultra-sectarian socialist group. It'll come from the left broadly, but more radical left, people moving from different directions, moving in a radical direction. It won't be like sectarian, but anyway, I do see the need for, Scott Ritter points that he thinks we could have a social revolution in Europe in the next couple of months. I hope he's right. Germany, what I've heard, they do have enough oil to last this winter. Barely. Man, they'll be in rough shape. But they'll really, next winter, they're going to totally shut down. This winter, they might get by. This winter, they might get by. Next winter, they won't. And, people, it's going to be a horrific situation all over Europe. It is already. Okay, so I do see some hope for the future. Also, in the U.S., this country. So, AOC was heckled about a month or so ago. AOC was heckled by a guy named an activist named Jose Varga and a few people around him. New York activists. I love the way there's a great action. Love the way they did it. Her rallies now, AOC's the left. Her rallies are now sparsely attended. The excitement wore off, and so these people were heckling her like, "Why are you voting to fund Ukraine? Why are you voting to fund Nazis in Ukraine? Why are you voting to get us to the brink of a nuclear war?" And she was taken off guard. Didn't know how to deal with it all. They claimed that this Jose Varga and his comrades were talking over a handicapped person. Well, apparently there was a handicapped person, a deaf person, who was following along with the meeting at home on Zoom. And this inadvertently interrupted him, and okay, that's sad and whatever, but, come on. What he did was pretty amazing. Called out AOC's support for Nazis in Ukraine. And then, Jose Varga is a part of the LaRouchites, the LaRouche organization. I'm not a fan. I talked about the LaRouchites in an earlier video. I'm not a fan of LaRouchites. Their history is known. But who cares? Who cares what organization he's from? He's doing it. He's doing what socialist groups should be doing, but they're too busy chasing after liberals, really. Okay, then he did this, and he did this at another time, I believe, with Obama. And some of the same people heckled Obama. That was great to see. Another group of people, I believe, is an anti-war group in the Midwest and a housing advocacy group, heckled Kamala Harris. It's the same thing. Like, why are you supporting Nazis in Ukraine? Why are you getting us to the brink of a nuclear war? This is going to create a nuclear war. And why are you spending more money on housing? Why are these people at $70 billion to Ukraine? Enormous amount. We still have trouble with a baby powder shortage in this country. So they're calling these people out. And called out, happened to Obama, happened to Kamala Harris, happened to AOC a couple times. This gives me hope for the future. Now, the Squad, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, Bernie was heckled, and by Nick Brana of the People's Party, he was heckled. Like, why are you? Bernie supported the Ukraine war. Why are you voting to fund Nazis in Ukraine? And Bernie, these were his former supporters, by the way. Nick Brana and the Movement for a People's Party came out of the Sanders campaign. These were his former supporters. You know how Bernie responded? He called them Russian assets. Oh, you're really working for me? Like, holy shit. Like, Bernie called these people heckling, called people opposing him from the left as Russian agents. Basically, that's what he said. Russiagate was used against him. Oh, I remember that. Like CNN report. Oh, the FBI says that there are, Putin Russian agents have infiltrated the Sanders campaign. So Sanders' reaction was, "Tell Mr. Putin to stay out of my campaign," which made Bernie look like such a fucking pathetic mush, pathetic piece of shit. He sold out his own supporters. So anyway, he was doing the same thing. Bernie Sanders was Russiagating his opponents to the left. So it shows what garbage he is. So anyway, this gives me hope for the future. The Squad, the Progressive Democrats, whatever, are essentially the fulcrum, the wedge of U.S. popular support for Ukraine. For billions of dollars, they supposedly control the left. So attacking them, heckling them like this, and activists really, it gives me hope. It's very productive. It shows the beginning of a nascent anti-war movement, and the Democrats can't co-opt it. It will be harder for the Democrats to co-opt it. They co-opted the Iraq anti-war movement very easily, and they co-opted the BLM movement very easily. They can't. It's a democratic war. It's seen as a democratic war. It is actually. And Democrats can't really co-opt. The Republicans can't either. I mean, there was some buzz in the midterms. There's going to be a red tidal wave. That didn't happen. The Republicans made some gains, and Nancy Pelosi won't be Speaker of the House, which is, but it's not going to affect policy. It's meaningless. It's not going to mean anything. And I don't think the Republicans would meaningfully oppose the Ukraine war or the military-industrial complex. They're fully a part of it themselves. Right now, rhetorically, in some areas like freedom of speech and militarism, the Republicans seem like the lesser of two evils, but I don't trust them either. They're just as bad. So it's a shit show. But this beginning of struggle from below, does give me some hope for the future. Okay, so if you enjoy my video, please like and subscribe. Hope helps me build the channel. And thanks for listening. Bye.